Hello and good evening and welcome to another video. I'm going to be doing some more practical setups with the World War II Wargaming Solitaire Toolkit. Solitaire even, put my teeth in. So I'm going to step through some scenario setups and I'm just going to put together a bunch of scenarios very quickly just to show you how it puts together historically grounded scenarios which you can turn into narratives quite easily. So the first thing you do in this, and there's all kinds of, especially at the beginning, setup, there's a random theater, but I'm going to pick the Russian theater. Specifically, we're going to go to the Minsk pocket. So here it's number 3 on the table, Soviet Union, 1941, the Minsk pocket. So the Germans have spearheads encircle the Soviet armies while Soviet defenders fight delaying battles along the Berezina River. Attackers Germans, defenders Soviets. So I noted down, I made myself a worksheet. You guys will probably put one together yourselves pretty easy. You know, scenario number, which is this one's going to be 1, because I am going to look at this as bunch of scenarios in a row. So let's go 1. Date played. I haven't played it yet. So the theater is the Russian theater or Soviet theater. The location map is it's in Belarus. Now, I looked at. Here's the fun thing with this. I go and I look at the map of where this is taking place. So the Minsk pocket, 1941. So you can see, if you look up, you can go online, look up, there's all kinds of campaign maps from that time. You don't have to do it. This is written so you can just jump straight in. But I like to look at, gives me an idea of, so there's, you know, Minsk moving in. There's the river we're talking about. So as the Germans push towards this river, the Soviets do a bunch of delaying actions. And then I went to Google, and for a narrative, I picked out the small village of Negoninchi, which is between Minsk and the river, or just coming up to the river. So, like the last one, I'm going to call this a recon, company level recon, pushing eastwards to try and find where the Russians are, you know, where the Russian troops are, and if they can, to, you know, stop them getting away, because the Minsk pocket's closing, or has closed. And, you know, they're trying to catch as many of the Russians as they can. And the Russians, on the other hand, are trying to stop the Germans pushing east so that they can get a defensive line built up. So that's what we're looking at. So using the book, we know where and when. We got the theater sorted out. You don't have to do all these. I like to do it because I like to, you know, get more of pull more of the history out. You don't have to. You could just say, hey, you know, it's by Minsk 1941, the Germans are the attackers. I'm going to choose terrain. There is a table for terrain in the book. I rarely use it, but I put it in there for a sense of completeness. Now, if you look at the Google Maps, you'll see it's mostly open terrain. The roads I take with a pinch of salt because the Google Maps are current. So what we're going to do is, so the Germans are coming in from, I'm going to put this right, so in from the west. So the Germans are coming in from the west here. So let's just grab some boards, some open boards, and see. Just put it together, kind of how you want to play the scenario. So here's the actual village. And again, I don't know what the Soviets, I don't know the objectives yet. I don't know what the Soviets are going to be doing. I'm going to be playing the Germans coming in from here. But using the toolkit, you know, we're going to have some wiggles to it. So here's our terrain. Germans coming in, Soviets there. So the next thing we want to look up is the objective type, mission description. So after the theater setup and the terrain layout we've done, Fourth generation, I'm going to leave till later. First, I want to, because we know, or I've decided, the game I want to play is going to be mostly infantry, like most games I play with ASL, or even, you know, if I was playing bolt action, a lot of it's infantry with a couple of tanks or armored vehicles. For those of you who like playing tanks, the fourth generation is, you know, it says here 2 times rifle companies. There's nothing to stop you putting in 2 tank platoons or, you know, a tank company. However you want to put that together, just match left to right. So if it says rifle companies, you say, no, I'm going to have, you know, a company of tanks or a platoon of tanks on the left, you know, and that on the right too. That's fine. Now, you don't have to do one-on-one either. Again, this is why I'm not doing fourth generation yet. I'm going to look at what the mission is. So, victory conditions, which is chapter 12. Now, I'm going to roll these victory conditions, which is a D20. So, we got a 10. 10 is a supply cutoff. So occupy greater than 1 road exiting the enemy edge. So again, so that's coming in. That sounds about right. So we're going to be coming in. We need to own these 2, any of these 3 roads that are coming off the edge. The reason they need to do that, again, the Russians are pulling out. We're trying to encircle and cut them off. We're trying to stop anybody supplying any Russians that may be over in this direction. So that's what the Germans will do. They're coming in. They want to get around and cut off these roads. Now, it says 8 to 10 turns. I got 3 boards. I'm going to make this a 10-turner. So that's the Germans. They've got to come in. They've got to cut off any supply. They've got to recon and force. When they find a supply route, they've got to make sure that the Russians can't use it. Forces are going to be Germans attack, Russians defend. So let's do fourth generation random. So the attacker is going to be the Germans. So we got a D100. Oh, shoot, let's throw that everywhere. So that's a 30 on the Germans. So it's going to be a rifle company plus a heavy weapons platoon. 2 rifle companies. So the Russians are going to have 2 rifle companies. So we've got elite firepower versus mass. That's going to be fun. Now, I'm also going to use company strength table, which is a 2d6 roll. So the Germans coming down the road, 10. They're going to be reinforced. 9 to 11 is reinforced. So we add a squad and a support weapon. So we're going to say +1 squad, +1 SW. Now, you can, you know, depending on what game system you're using, you know, this is just, if you write this down and then look at your game system, how you want to do this. For example, if I were playing bolt action, I'd still do this and then pick from the rifle company what I've got available to me as models first, and then, you know, and the same with the Russians, and set the table up based on, you know, the bolt action scale. So then we'd be scaling in on, obviously you're not going to have a table this big for bolt action. You're going to be looking at maybe, you know, this much of it, or whatever you want to do for terrain. So, you know, scalable. And Flames of War, they have usually a lot more models. So, and I'm not that good at Flames of War. But again, it's in company sizes and platoon sizes, so, you know, all of this is doable and scalable. Now, the Russians are going to be 8. Standard strength. So, no changes there. So we got a reinforced German rifle company with a heavy weapons platoon against 2 Russian rifle companies. Now, we can then look at deployment. How are they deployed? So deployment is a D10. That's a 4 on deployment. So the Russians have defender setup is a national defense. Main force deployed back 1/3 of the table with obstacles and mines ahead. Again, they're doing a delay in action, so that makes sense. Attacker setup is staggered entry. So the Germans come in. 2/3 of us move into the 2/3. Move on table. Turn 1. And then the rest on turn 2. So the Germans come in staggered. So there we have our deployment. So the next thing we need, we're going to do 2 more rolls, and then we'll see how that sets up. First one is scenario tweaks. So the scenario setup events. We've got roughly, so we're going to have Germans coming in staggered. We got Russians on the last board with some obstacles in front. The Germans need to get through to the Russians to cut off these supply roads. That's the scenario. But we're going to have a scenario tweak, which is chapter 14. It's a D20. This is my 14. 14, severe weather. So it's going to be rain. Line of sight reduced to short range, affects both. So let's put that under the weather. And then the other roll we need to do is fog of war. Because this shows how many, at least in ASL and other games, they have different markers as to how hidden they are when the Germans come marching in. So that's a D20. 19. So the Russians are pretty hidden. The Germans have very little clue of what they are or where the Russians are. And then fuel shortage. Before the game begins, each side randomly selects a vehicle. On a poor roll, it cannot move this scenario. Right, we don't have any vehicles, so we're good. And that's fog of war. So now we can actually set up the game. Okay, so here's the Russian setup. Before I put on the hidden markers, we can see that mostly, so one company's billeted here in the main village. The other company is billeted in the surrounding buildings. Okay, so there's our setup. I've got the hidden counters on there. So this is, I mean, the Germans don't really know what they're marching into. So they're saying, we know there's Russians ahead. They could be anywhere, basically. So there's that. Now, here's the other thing that this system does quite well, I think. Is when you play solitaire, you always play yourself, kind of. And then they say things like, well, if you cheat or if you make a wrong move, you're just cheating yourself, blah, blah, blah. It's very hard to simulate when the enemy makes a mistake, if you see what I mean. Or, you know, what is the enemy trying to do? So in the toolkit, we have the opponent AI oracle. So I just rolled a 7. And what happens is, so you've got the AI opponent behavior matrix. This is the general orders. This is what the enemy's basically trying to do. What their main commander is saying, this is the goal of this battle for them. And the Russians in this one have counterattack. So wait until enemy commits, then strike aggressively with reserves. So that makes sense, because at some point, I think the Russians are going to realize that the Germans are outnumbered and is going to push back. So that's what, during the play of this game, you know, we're going to follow that general order for the Russians. So then I'm not, you know, playing against myself, trying to be opportunistic. I have got to stick to that scheme for the Russians. You know, the overall stances include things like static defense, stay in place, dig in, fire at range, mobile defense, trade ground for time, conduct fighting withdrawals, delay harass, avoid decisive battle, focus on slowing the enemy, inflicting attrition. There's all kinds of AI opponent behavior, which will be the standing orders. You know, so depending on what your game system is, you know, it stops you, or it helps stop you fighting against yourself and fighting against a set enemy behavior that you have to play when you're playing the enemy. And then also, along with that, each overall stance has a subtable. So we're doing, let's see, counterattack. Now, under counterattack, each one has a D10 table, which you can then say, look, I don't know what these guys are going to do, you know, any given turn, and I want them to do something. Roll a 9, delay briefly, then surge forward. There we go. So now I have an idea of what they're going to do. That their commander has given them that kind of, you know, that's what they want to do. And then play, you still play to the best of your ability, but it shapes what the enemy does. So you're not really shaping it. It stops you playing against yourself a little. Now, it doesn't mean you have to play stupid, but you do have to play within those general orders. So that being said, that's our battle. We have the Germans are going to come in 2/3 of them first, so they're going to come in 2 waves. They're going to meet the enemy. And then when the Russians realize that, you know, when they've got the Germans committed and they realize they've outnumbered them, they're probably going to counterattack. Now, the Germans have not got it good in this because I think their best bet is they move in. The Russians counterattack, they use their heavy weapons squad. This is a lot of open ground, but they use their heavy weapons squad if they can get it right. I mean, this is a prime place, but to, you know, to destroy that counterattack. But that being said, they have to cut off these roads. So, you know, do they split their forces and send someone through? That's going to be tough if they get counterattacked all the way in. The only other thing is we do have heavy rain, which keeps it at close range, which for, in terms of this game, I'm going to say is normal range of a rifle squad, which would be 6 hexes. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, you know, they can only see less than half a board, including the Russians. So, you know, that's in the Germans' favor, obviously, when you're going against lots. You keep yourself close and punch a hole, and that way they can get maybe their defensive stuff in. Anyway, that's the scenario that this came, you know, this kit here came up with, and I'm looking forward to playing it. It's a fun thing. The other thing I will say is, you know, because you're playing solitaire against yourself, it doesn't have to be fair, which is what I love about solo gaming. This is a scenario of something that could have happened. So, you know, how do you deal with that is really what you're playing for. And then this also has tables for what happens after the campaign, so you can join campaigns together. So I can take these guys and say, okay, these are my guys. Whatever happens this battle, we roll to see what they get for reinforcements. Does anyone get promoted? Do we get extra stuff? Which depends on if we win or if we lose this battle. And then make another scenario a little further down the line using these guys, rolling up who they're against, and keep, you know, churning it forward. So, you know, you don't always have to have just a one-offs, which you can if you like one-offs, but you can string them together. There are tables for reinforcements and things like that. And you may, if you have bad luck, just attrition your unit down to nothing. So, you know. Anyway, that's this video done. And what I'm going to do after this is I may do a short video where I put together 5 or 6 of them in a montage, so you can see the different types of scenarios that you can get out of this. Anyway, that's wrapped up for this one, and grab yourself a copy of this. I've tried to keep it as inexpensive as possible. It's on Amazon, link below. And thank you very much for watching.